It was my third year of elementary school, and with my dad working odd shifts, he sometimes came to pick me up from school. Then this one time, he turns up with my grandma, which was always a welcome surprise. He had to drop her off somewhere on the way home, and she'd be coming back to our place for dinner once she was done. Grandma didn't walk so good back then, as this was back before her hip operation, so more often than not, she needed help getting up large or particularly steep flights of stairs. When we got to wherever we needed to drop Grandma off, we asked my dad if he'd accompany her up the front steps. He obviously wasn't about to say no, so he got out, helped her from the car, and started walking her towards the stairway. It was only steps away from the car, so apparently my dad thought nothing of leaving the key still in the ignition. But I was way too small to notice, and even if I did, I don't think that I'd have the wherewithal to really spot the risk. So they're out of the car, and I don't know what it was that caught my eye, but I leaned forward and to the back to try and reach something under the front seat. It must have been a Pokemon card or Pog or something, because I remember straining really hard for it when suddenly someone got back into the driver's seat. This causes me to sit back up in my seat, expecting to see the back of my dad's head in front of me. Only when I look, it's not the back of my dad's head. A total stranger had climbed into the car, and I watched in horror as they closed the driver's side door again and started up the car. I was too stunned to speak at first, and I remember thinking to myself, is this supposed to happen? I mean, for a dude to just so brazenly get into my dad's car like that, there had to be some kind of reason for it, right? But then, as he closed the door and started the engine, obviously intending to drive off, I realized something else was going on, something very bad. When I finally found it in myself to speak, I sort of stammered out something like, "Please don't." I thought the guy might not have known that I was there and he only wanted the car. If he knew I was, then maybe he'd let me out so he could drive off without accidentally kidnapping someone. But then the moment I spoke, he said, "Shut up," and then just drove off with me screaming in the back seat. It's important to note that my dad's SUV had child locks on the rear doors, and with my little sister being a few years younger than 8-year-old me, he kept them locked all the time. So, if I was going to get out, the guy needed to disengage the child locks, and that's how I ended up trapped and unable to escape when I had the chance. As the guy drives off, I'm just wailing like a banshee in the backseat of my dad's SUV, begging this guy to let me go after it dawns on me that he might actually want me too, not just the car. I'm screaming, but the whole time he's screaming back at me to shut the F up or he's gonna kill me. All this other terrifying stuff. I don't know how long this went on for, but I was definitely crying by the time the guy slammed on the brakes, which threw me off my seat because I'd taken my seatbelt off. I was thrown forward into the seat in front of me, and I remember it hurting really bad, but before I had a chance to wonder if anything was broken or not, I heard the distinct sound of the child lock disengaging. The back doors were open, and my escape route was assured. I scrambled to get to the door handle, all to the sound of the car thief in the front seat screaming, "Get the hell out of my car right effing now, kid." He did not need to tell me twice. I ran screaming back up the street, not even bothering to close the door behind me, which I think probably closed on its own from the sheer momentum of the guy zooming off in my dad's car. I ran and kept running until I met my dad in the street, who was in the same kind of hysterics that I was. I remember my dad being in tears too, and I'm not sure who gave us a ride back home, be it a cab or a good Samaritan or something, but the next thing I remember is hugging my mom, crying a lot, and then my dad carrying me to bed so I could sleep the whole thing off. It's a memory that stayed with me for a long time, and I honestly think it's had a profound effect on how I developed as a person. I won't bore you with all the details on that, as I guess they probably belong in another thread, but in terms of recalling how I felt that day, it's something that I used to revisit daily, and a lot of that is down to the fact that they never caught the guy who stole my dad's SUV. This was way back before microchipped cars and stuff like that, and we used to live in a pretty shady area of Newark, so I guess cars had a way of just disappearing around that time. But that also meant that they were unable to track down the car thief, so in my mind, This guy's just walking around New Jersey, waiting to bump into me so I can relive that same crippling terror all over again. Obviously, that didn't ever happen. The odds would be astronomical, but the possibility haunted me, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.